Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
I used to worry a lot about chemtrails, and then the curtain was pulled back on the brick wall, as Frank Zappa would say, and I was like, oh, the chemtrails were nothing. A year ago, I thought chemtrails were the biggest problem, and now I'm like, oh, I see. We actually literally, I always think like, it's like the Truman Show. I'm like, no, it actually is the Truman Show now. I accidentally experienced natural childbirth. It was not my idea. But like, they're like, oh, it's too late. We can't give you these drugs. And I was like, okay. I learned later it's never too late. And I got in the car and I was like, the keys are in my hand, but the car is running. So that can't be right. Liberty, and then the enlightenment that would come with that true liberty, if that makes sense. Or is that too woo-woo?
No, you're speaking our language right now, Monica. We're woo-woo as fuck.
It's a treadmill. It's not a road. Like, forget it. Somehow or other touched by the deep state. I mean, Kaczynski was an MK Ultra victim. Terry Nichols was probably special ops if he was Timothy McVeigh's buddy. And that older Tsarnaev was in the CIA. The kid, though, just wanted to be a dentist. I'm sure they tagged him along because they were in the family. And to the point where my analysis, Alex Jones ripped off. I was very proud of that. I only do one interview every other week, and it's usually somebody I already know and has a subject matter. Like, I'm going to do an interview with a patron who homeschools, and she's just so good at it that I'm just going to have her on, and I don't care at all. And besides, I feel at a certain point, there are plenty of podcasts around just interviewing the same people over and over again. Anybody that Greg Carlwood does 2 hours with does not need, I'm not enhancing the world by spending an hour with that person after I listen to Carlwood and be like, wow, that was such a great interview. Wow. Yeah. So, but you have all those other topics like the enhancement. And to tell you the truth, I'm starting to go in that direction of trying to, well, actually, maybe we should talk about this. I was inspired by this idea with your microdosing chick about like agorism, which I now understand the value there. And I said, maybe agorism is like the acid in the 60s, where it actually gets people who are politically concerned to check out. It's good, just like rock and roll and acid, but it serves their purposes because that's allowed, and maybe it shouldn't be, but they talk about like buy your land, it's allowed. There are people I think are super fishy who talk about that. And then when your chick was talking about acid, I was like, oh, they're bringing acid back too. Like, I know people are microdosing, but it just hit me. So maybe we could, but you know what you want to talk about.
Well, no, I mean, if you have questions, we're happy to
I think it's nice that you have a good variety, and I am already inspired by some of your shows with some new insights. So we can hit that.
Thank you. Yeah, whenever you got any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But since you brought up the topic of microdosing and LSD, we can get right into it. One of my greatest experiences ever was when I took LSD and ran the Boston Marathon.
Wow. Don't you have to dig deep inside yourself to get the strength to finish a marathon? Is there are you deeper inside yourself with the acid?
We grew up running. We had two options growing up. It was running or wrestling. So for us, when we do psychedelics and run, it's connected to something that we were doing our whole life. So it's pretty deep for us.
Oh my God, I already have questions. Yeah, so I just can't imagine. I think it would be too hard to do the marathon in the first place, much less, I mean, I don't think I could handle either of those things mentally, frankly. I mean,
Well,
I'm not going to say I haven't had those types of experiences, but I'm not a natural at anything like that. Like I could never do a marathon, and I'm not like a person who could eat acid every third day or whatever. I just couldn't do it.
Well, it's such a small little, almost sub perceptual that it's if you do the right amount of a microdose, you don't even really notice it. Like sometimes you pick up on certain things, especially if like you're outside or there's certain lighting, or like fall is a great time because of all the colors. And then on like really clear days, but with like fluffy, like cotton ball type clouds, you notice the clouds a little bit more. And
what does it actually do? It allows you to kind of dream a little bit while you're awake, right? Isn't that the basic like chemical operation, or not?
I mean, I would only be giving you some bro science right now, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, this is what I thought I understood about it. Is like Prozac and the antidepressant, the SSRI, the suppressants of the serotonin reuptake, they keep you from dreaming. Like what allows you to dream at night, which I don't know what it is, but like, so psilocybin mushrooms, for example, allow that stuff to enter, the chemical mix in your brain while you're awake. And Prozac, on the other hand, pushes it out. So I always just thought of it as being just slightly dreaming while you're awake, which would be good, but it could quickly turn into a nightmare if your fluffy clouds turn into crisscross chemtrails and you're just like, holy shit, the entire world is coming to an end. And I can't believe I used to worry a lot about chemtrails. And then the curtain was pulled back on the brick wall, as Frank Zappa would say. And I was like, oh, the chemtrails were nothing. A year ago, I thought chemtrails were the biggest problem. And now I'm like, oh, I see. We actually literally, I always think like, it's like the Truman Show. I'm like, no, it actually is the Truman Show now. It's not, it's like, you can see it coming. It's like, oh, we didn't even realize, but like, there's the dome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it, for me, for both of us, I would say as adults, not necessarily like college kids or whatever, but like as adults, the journey into psychedelics is more about, what are you doing? It's about mental health and just being happy. I wouldn't necessarily say that I deal with depression. I think it's more of, looking towards the future or thinking about the past and not living in the moment. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, where people just say, oh, I'm depressed or I'm bummed out. And it's like, no, you're probably worrying about the future, or, dreaming or thinking about the past and not living in the present moment. So psychedelics, going down to Peru and doing ayahuasca and those sorts of things, it's this journey of, doing the work and trying to be grateful for every moment and be in the moment and live in the moment. And so that's what kind of led to this whole microdosing thing. But then also when you look into, when Albert Hofmann first synthesized LSD, he was doing it to try to create a circulatory or a respiratory system stimulant. So then I start looking into it from an athletic perspective. It's like, if this is a circulatory or respiratory stimulant, this might also have some performance enhancing benefits. But then when you get out there and you're in the moment, we live here in Colorado, we used to live at 10,000 feet. So when you're out in the mountains and you just have this unbelievable appreciation for, like I said, for the clouds, or I'm running the Boston Marathon with 35,000 other people. There's 500,000 other people that want to do this that can't qualify and do this. So you have like this a greater appreciation for it. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this hurts a little bit, but I want to hurt a little bit more for all those people that can't do this race, whether they couldn't qualify or it's someone who, maybe be in a wheelchair. I was in special education for 11 years. So it's like, well, these people couldn't do this either. So I'm going to push harder and go harder to give a little suffering and a little gratitude for those people that can't do that. So that was, with the girls that we've talked about microdosing, it's talking about, when people hear or they associate performance enhancement, they think of like Barry Bonds or Lance Armstrong, where people are taking steroids or doing testosterone. My perspective with psychedelics and performance enhancements, or even THC, is that these endurance events are so mental. Well, if I'm using something that's triggering something in my brain that's allowing me to supersede the physical and go beyond that, isn't that a performance enhancement in itself?
I have so many things I want to say, but I missed that the performance enhancing being mental. Are you saying that they should disallow psychedelics or allow the
No, I'm just saying in general, it should be looked at as, because like, the big debate with say like athletes is, whether or not, because for the longest time, marijuana was a banned substance. And if you got caught with marijuana in your system, you would lose your Olympic medal or you would get suspended. And people are always like, well, there's no performance enhancing benefits to it. And in my research is that maybe there are some, maybe not physically, but there's a mental performance.
Yes. So here's my reaction to that is that I accidentally experienced natural childbirth. It was not my idea, but like, they're like, oh, it's too late. We can't give you these drugs. And I was like, okay. I learned later it's never too late. And there were actually benefits to it in the end, in that I recovered very quickly. My baby was just like wide awake, and it was crystal clear, having had other kids with a lot of drugs, that the reason you feel terrible for 3 days is the amount of drugs that you're trying to process. And I'm sure the baby feels that way too. I still wouldn't recommend it because it was crazy painful. But
see, right there, you could run a marathon.
Well, this is what I'm getting at, is that the thing about that was, what I observed at that moment was, I've experienced much less pain, but it was worse for me because every other time I had a lot of fear. Like, pain is there to create fear so that you stop doing that thing. Your body says, oh, stop doing that thing. So the element of the psychedelics would be, my fear would be that it could go where it increases the fear. And I can't even imagine a scenario where, I imagine it would come from having had enough experience with the psychedelics that you learn how to control like what's scary about a new experience. See, I've never really been into it so much that I could get through to where it's good. But
yeah,
I think that it's possible that that it helps with that fear factor, which is a future thinking thing, right? Because if it's not a future thinking thing, then you're just stopped. If it's going to hurt you and it hurt you and you had to stop, that's not fear. That's just the physical reality of you just can't do it. But the rest of the stuff about pushing through that pain is fear, because I contend that you can go through human beings can endure any amount of pain without fear, that at a certain point. But that you live in Colorado and spend some time in Peru. I've been to Peru a few times. I climbed Machu Picchu. That was, talk about, I'm not a chick who's like into,
you can run a marathon.
Well, our guide was, and I actually knew a missionary priest there. So I even took the, it was a motor, but it was a sketchy boat, like 5 hours up the Amazon. And to the point where it was kind of like, if you ever read the real story of Captain Bligh on the ocean, they were thousands of miles on the ocean and they would pass islands. They were in a boat, the mutineers threw them off the thing into the boat. And the crew, the 20 guys in his boat, were saying, we just got to stop at that island. He's like, you can't stop at the island. There are cannibals there, like real bona fide cannibals. They will just eat you like they ate Captain Cook. It's not going to happen. And they had to like press on. And that was the thing in the Amazon. It's just like, you better not, it's a rickety boat. It's like, you cannot stop. And the the priest loved the people. He was just like, you're going to freak them out. It's not cool. We can't stop there. But so it was a great experience. The Machu Picchu thing, yeah, it's kind of touristy, but our guide there, so Machu Picchu is 26 miles from the bottom to the top, I guess, or wherever you start to wherever it finishes. And they do a marathon. Like the guys will run it. And the air is so thin. I would get like ill from the Cusco and stuff, but you couldn't have. I mean, Cusco's only 9,000 feet, I think. So if you were living at 10,000 feet, you had quite an advantage. And I'm guessing you had a huge advantage in the Boston Marathon for that reason too.
Yeah, and I've run the Leadville 100 3 times too. So the marathon isn't really, it's
no big deal. I'm a city girl. I don't know. I just, I guess it's I guess anything is possible. Do you think that there's a natural disposition, or do you think that it's about mental? It's all mental.
I mean, you have to, in terms of just completing something, I would say it's mental. If we're talking about, hitting certain time requirements or certain places, then obviously there's some extensive work that needs to be done. I always tell my clients the specificity of your goals is what's going to determine the specificity of your training. So there's that, but I tell people all the time when, you always get, I don't even drive my car 100 miles, and it's like, if I had a gun to your head right now and gave you a pack filled with food and water and told you to get moving, you would get moving and you would finish it. And especially if there wasn't like a time domain.
Well, that's where you eliminate the fear, because the greater fear is to die.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I also think too, it's a very fine line and it can be a slippery slope. A lot of it is within the dose. But when I did the Boston Marathon it was in 2019, I did it in 2014, the year after the bombing, which we'll get into. But that was at the time, that was the most, that was the highest amount of LSD I took for an event. So when I was peaking, it definitely was a bit overwhelming.
Right.
Like claustrophobic. I wasn't fearful of anything. It wasn't like, I wasn't worried about anything happening. Like I could completely function. It almost felt like a metronome. Like my legs weren't even, it wasn't even me.
Yeah.
But the claustrophobia and the overwhelmingness of it all, I looked down and I was in the middle of the road and the two yellow lines were kind of like, just because of the color, almost seemed like and the LSD, obviously they were raised up off the road. And I just thought, follow the yellow lines. And I basically followed the yellow lines all the way to the finish line.
I did have a strange experience like that in my youth. It was similar. It sounds so insanely reckless because I was driving a car. So I probably don't. And I was just literally like, this was terrible. I was in a really crazy position in Colorado. I lived in Colorado for a year and I was like in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know anybody. Somebody kind of slipped me something that I just didn't understand. Like I didn't understand hallucinogenics at all. Like I didn't know there was such a thing that could change the way you perceive things. I didn't know. And I had to get home. And I had a car and I got in the car and I was like, the keys are in my hand, but the car is running. So that can't be right. So I experienced like the car in motion somehow. And I was like, okay, well, in order to make this right, I need to get the key in the car, and then everything will match. And then I'm terrible with directions. It was like one of those places where there's really wasn't lights on the road. I had to like stop at CVS and ask them how to go wherever it was, ask them 7-Eleven. And I thought, and I'm sure the guy was like, people are not inexperienced up there. And I'm sure they know exactly what was going on. And I don't know how I pieced it together, but I was just like, well, I know how to do this. I'm going to, it was terribly reckless thing to do, but whatever. I was young and stupid, but you can control the part of your mind that needs to function. But you were saying about staying in the present. And at some point, I did a lot of yoga, the kind of yoga where you really get into a pretzel kind of thing, Ashtanga yoga, where it's like self-led. I really loved it because you go at your own pace. I really loved it. And I thought, who thought of this? Like, this is amazing. And this is, my husband laughed at me because this is what I'll do. Like, I'll watch some dumb TV show and I'll be like, what in Rome? We watched this dumb thing on HBO. And like by the end of the series, which was just a soap opera, I had 12 books on ancient Rome. And I was just like, oh, that's realistic. That's not really, just read the whole thing. I was like, that was a real guy. And like, this is what his life story was. So with the yoga, then I didn't like read about yoga. I read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali written by Swami Satchidananda. Like, it was the best of everything. It was really great. It was 3,500 years ago. I was like, man, like maybe Jesus was the Buddha. Like this is this eternal wisdom. And the best part was the question of God is unanswerable and irrelevant, because the answer to the question of this life is the same as the answer to the question of the next life, which is to free yourself from desire. Not by satisfying desire. You can have everything you want if you want nothing. Okay. So I went down that road and I had 3 kids in diapers, and I totally was like, this is 100% right. And I tried to live it, like really wash a dish, like really not worry about anything and just be in the moment and do your work and don't want anything, consume nothing. I mean, I forgot to get the kids to lunch. I missed, making lunch, missed the planes. And I had a sister at the time who was a heroin addict. She had all sorts of problems, and she did ultimately die of a heroin overdose. And everybody felt sorry for her. But I remember calling her and I was like, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. Like, you have no kids, you don't own a house, like you've got nothing. You can do this, And she was like, are you kidding me? I got nothing. You got husband, you got kids, you got that nice house, and you're telling me I'm lucky. I was like, forget it. Like, like if it just, you don't get it. And I sent her the book, of course, and all that, but she didn't get it. But I find the only way I could really live in the moment is if I divorce myself from anything that is confined by time as we measure it. So I can't do that because I have teenagers, which is like even worse. They really have to be places. Today I had all sorts of crisis because we're in California. It's totally locked down. It's awful, but they are starting to do sports again. And I just got out of the habit of driving them around. And so I'm a slave to the clock, if nothing else. And it's really interferes with, it almost interferes with my ability to eat. I can't take that step, be in the present. And that's only the first step to, maybe a deeper insight into the real purpose. Like, so when he said the answer is irrelevant or unanswerable because the answer is the same here and there, and you should divorce yourself from desire, there's definitely more than that. I'm sure like the remaining, hundreds of Yoga Sutras, I did not fully comprehend, because like when you're stuck in that, the tyranny of the lists and stuff, all that's, I find it very difficult. It's almost like it's a trap, the way progressive taxation is meant for you to never, in my opinion, never have enough surplus to occupy yourself with, say, going to Washington, like pulling a Ron Paul. Like, I think that that this system is designed to keep us from liberty and then the enlightenment that would come with that true liberty, if that makes sense. Or is that too woo-woo for you?
No, you're speaking our language right now, Monica. We're woo-woo as fuck.
Well, I think
that's where being an agorist comes in.
I know, but I'm only a philosophical agorist. I recognize the truth to it, but I don't think I could kill a chicken. I don't know.
That's what your husband's for.
He could kill a chicken. That is very true. Like, and he's got the instinct.
Swing him around by its neck.
I did talk my husband and my son into starting the garden. So I have a lot of listeners. They send me like seeds. They feel so bad for me because I don't have, like, I do have a good house and kids, and my husband has a job and everything. They all feel bad for me because I don't have a chicken. So they send me the seeds and everything. And I really like did not know what, I really don't know what to do with it. So but the guys are starting it for me, the guys and my son and my husband. So that's good. And hopefully actually the real goal would be to get them hooked on it so that they agree with me that we should move someplace that's more friendly to it. Like, I just cannot imagine they let a chicken in this neighborhood, but I don't know. You know, maybe the poorer neighborhoods will do it. Like I don't know. I mean, it's LA. Maybe they have variety.
They're having cockfights in East LA.
Totally. Actually, my son, I feel so proud. He had to do a volunteer thing for school. And a friend of mine rescues pit bulls from death row. And now he's doing that. And he's really learning, like he's understanding that most of the animals are just like abused and you have to deal with them. So, but they're coming out of LA. They're coming out of the fighting. So I know it's out there, but we're just fairly new here, and I got to learn the ropes, but that's what I want the kids and my husband to aspire towards, that direction. Cause we all put a lot of effort into our lives, but once you keep feeding the machine, as soon as I discovered that every time my husband got a raise, he was in a higher tax bracket, I was like, oh, this needs to stop. Like, I'm done. Let's move to Idaho. And he's like, what? I've come so far. I'm like, yeah, but you know what I mean? It's a treadmill. It's not a road. Like, forget it. And that was a long time ago. And still to this day, he's like, someday it'll be worth it. Like, okay, whatever, let's just learn how to take matters into our own hands, because that is also a trap. So you start out with college, you get the first act an adult ever does in this country is to take on a massive amount of debt. And then in the end, if you've really made it, your kids don't qualify for the loans, and you can take all your retirement money and pay for their college so that they can start the cycle, maybe level up, but it's still that cycle. And you know what really opened my eyes, I hate to admit it, was reading Ted Kaczynski's book. We might have to edit that out.
No. This is awesome, because we can tie this all together here.
All right.
Because as I was doing some stuff, looking into the topics that we wanted to talk with you about, it just happened to be that Ted Kaczynski, Terry Nichols, and the one brother from the Boston bombing all happened to be in the same prison here in Colorado.
Really?
Is
Kaczynski there now?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, I think that other brother's dead, though.
Is he?
I think the Jahar Tsarnaev thing is a false story, but that doesn't mean that place isn't the place where they jam the stuff that they don't want word getting out.
It's a who's who of, it's ADX Florence is the name.
Yes, because all of those people were somehow or other touched by the deep state. I mean, Kaczynski was an MK Ultra victim. Terry Nichols was probably special ops if he was Timothy McVeigh's buddy. And that older Tsarnaev was in the CIA. The kid, though, just wanted to be a dentist. I'm sure they tagged him along because they were in the family, like literally. That's really sad. That's sad. I think he's dead. But wow, is that also where they put Tommy Chong or Ross Ulbricht? I think Tommy Chong was in Colorado. Yeah,
he might have been. But yeah, so as we've been talking here, we've been athletes our whole life. I've been a runner. I ran my first race when I was 5. It was always a lifelong dream to run the Boston Marathon. I was actually in Peru. I just come out of the jungle from my first 7 ayahuasca ceremonies and had clients, friends, and family that were all on the starting line in Boston in 2013. Actually, one of my friends was one of the last, if not the last people that was allowed to cross the finish line in Boston in 2013. And so when you start talking about these things to people like my friends and family that were actually there, and you suggest certain things, I mean, you can literally see their heads starting to expand and almost explode. And so I think it's important for people to realize that when we're saying certain things aren't in line with the narrative, that we're not necessarily discrediting that people didn't get injured or people didn't lose their lives.
I am not.
Or this
I'm
wasn't
not one of the ones who says it was a hoax. I have no idea.
No, I know, but I'm just saying in general with certain events, if you go against the mainstream narrative, you're demonized, or people think you're crazy. And like you said, we're just here trying to search for the truth. And I've heard you speak about your research, and this is kind of you were on the air doing these things when all this happened, or you had to go on the air the day of this to do this. So if you could kind of share with us your experience and your research and information that you found that may not fall in line with the mainstream narrative.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to hear it.
So and first of all, to what you're saying, I was actually a little naive when people would kind of give me the attitude that I was somehow an a-hole because I didn't buy the official narrative. And my answer was, don't you want to know who really did it? Like, what if it is a white American politician who's, do you think he's not capable of it? Like, do you not want him to suffer the consequences of that kind of conspiracy? Because these are conspiracies. 9/11 was a conspiracy. Was it a conspiracy of a bunch of poor Saudi Arabian guys who had nothing to do with their own government? Or was it a conspiracy of guys who might actually be capable of it from the Western world? I don't know, but somebody did it and it's a conspiracy. So let's get some evidence out there. So I was on the radio at the time. I'd only been on the radio for like a year and a half. And normally I do the weekends. It's my show, it's my audience, but sometimes I had more of a primetime spot during the week where I was filling in for somebody else. It was a big audience, and it was really the big people tune in for traffic and weather and the conservatives and stuff. It was the station Rush ended up on, it was like that. And, but I was very just about the truth. It was actually the Boston Marathon bombing that opened my eyes to 9/11. So I wasn't a 9/11 truther going into this. I was a gal who had to answer. I mean, there probably were hundreds of thousands of people listening, and it was a news station. And in my experience to that moment, all I would do is I would pick one story for a show, and I would try to get all the answers, and I would be bombarded if I got anything wrong or anything that deviated from the script or anything that wasn't right, straight from the Wall Street Journal. People would call me out. So I would spend all my time learning all the stuff from the mainstream media, but probing it to make sure, was it evidence? And I would really do it just so I had my story right. It was out of just a pure sense of insecurity, like as if it was a PhD dissertation every week. It was very, I really put a lot of pressure on myself. So I just went out to say I could answer everyone's questions who called in about the topic. So I was reading every article of the Boston Globe. I was reading everything. It was just like same day or the next day or something like that. I stayed up all night looking at these pictures of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, because there was this thing of the naked man that CNN showed, a naked man being arrested that night who looked exactly like Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who they later told us died at the scene of a shootout. So I was like, well, was he in police custody when he died? Is this Tamerlan Tsarnaev? So I looked up every picture I could find of Tamerlan Tsarnaev. I was up all night. And he was a boxer, and he was featured. He wanted to be an Olympian. He was featured. And I literally counted chest hairs, literally, to see if it was the same guy. And to the point where my analysis, Alex Jones ripped off. I was very proud of that. Like, he published the hairs. And So I was just ripping the stuff apart. And what I immediately realized from day to day is that the official story was changing in the newspaper. And I then would go and look for the retractions from the previous day. Talk about naive, huh? So I would go back and be like, oh, like yesterday they said this. And then, so I guess they're going to retract that it was an error when they said it, but they didn't. They were just morphing the story. And the biggest smoking gun on that was that these guys supposedly hijacked a car. And frankly, I don't even think they had anything to do with, I think they tied a lot of crimes together from that night that weren't anything to do with the Tsarnaevs or the Boston Marathon bombing. And one of those was this carjacking where seemed like a Middle Eastern immigrant was working at a gas station, and he said a Caucasian male ran in hysterical. He actually thought the guy was faking it, acting. And that hysterical guy said, my car just got hijacked. They threw me out of the car. And then, so maybe that was staged. I don't know. But then after the fact, the story was, and John Miller, if I remember the name right, who's now like an NYPD spokesperson. He had previously been an FBI spokesperson, but at this moment he was a CBS reporter. He got the exclusive with Jahar Tsarnaev and with some of the guys at the Jahar arrest, and the exclusive with Danny, the carjack victim, who was in this iteration of the story Chinese. So they completely changed it. And I couldn't understand because I had the video of the clerk explaining it in still hysterical. So like that guy, I mean, the victim was probably still on his premises when they came to talk to him. So, and then the story was, well, they are homicidal maniacs, but they didn't kill me because they didn't want to kill Chinese people. But a Chinese person was a victim of the Boston Marathon. When you light off a bomb that kills hundreds of people, you're definitely not putting that fine a point on it. So there was things like that. The only other like really weird, the other crime that I think had nothing to do with it was that Sean Collier and Richard Donahue were two cops who went to school together. And one guy was an MIT area cop and the other guy was Boston Transit. And Sean Collier was shot gangland style, like 6 times. And Richard Donahue was shot right in the femoral artery, like right in the artery, like someone walked up to him with a gun down and just shot him right where he knew he was going to die. And then he bled out for like 45 minutes and everybody thought he was dead. But the way they told the story was that's what I think really happened. I think those guys were being assassinated either probably as an inside job for something they were up to or something they knew and they were associated with each other. But that's not how it was portrayed. How it was portrayed is that it had something to do with the Boston Marathon bombing, that the bombers found Collier, wanted his gun. So they took their gun, basically emptied it into him and then failed to take his gun. So that was a dumb story. And that Richard Donahue died in the gunfight in Watertown. There were 6 Watertown cops and Richard Donahue, who was a Boston Transit cop who had just discovered his friend shot, but then for some reason went to Watertown to chase it didn't say he chased them, but that he just showed up there and that he was the only one who died. And then again, like that story also changed over time where there was this massive gunfight with all, kind of all different elements of government there on the Watertown scene. And so they revived that Richard Donahue guy. And I was like, that's going to be friendly fire. That was friendly fire for sure. They were going to find a cop bullet in his leg. And they did. And I was like, that's because this other thing happened, like they were blaming it on it. But I had a feeling there's something wrong with that. And they did not expect that guy to come back. And I looked into it and there are cases. There is a special thing they can do. People have been kind of drained of blood for up to 4 hours and resuscitated. It's a experimental thing. So it was possible. But anyway, and then the only other thing I'll say about all of this is that there was tons of evidence, or I should say there's a documented proof that Tamerlan Tsarnaev was at it's called the Jamestown Foundation. I think it was in Beirut or something. It's basically like an offsite for the CIA operatives, up and comers, whatever, to launch kind of operations in the Middle East. So you take that, he was there as an attendee, or like a CIA guy. Then you take his Uncle Sarney, it was Uncle Ruslan and Sarney, but his used to be Tsarnaev. His wife was Samantha Fuller Tsarnaev. Ruslan's wife was Samantha Fuller. Samantha Fuller's father was Graham Fuller, who was the head of the CIA in Afghanistan. And there's a quote that I read in a book, Dollars for Terror, which was before 9/11. So there was no like crazy conspiracy theory thing. It was just a book by LaFavier, I think the guy's name was. And it had a quote from Fuller that said, we are going to infiltrate Central Asia and that oil area with our radical Islamists, the way we've done it in the Middle East so well, such as in Dagestan and Chechnya. And these guys were from Dagestan, and his son-in-law was running a U.S. aid, which is a absolutely reported in the New York Times CIA front organization, out of Graham Fuller's basement. Like so Tsarnaev had the same address for doing government work. And then I started piecing together that I think that's what Tamerlan was over there, like doing the Jamestown Foundation. There was later an article from the Wall Street Journal that he was over in Dagestan and Chechnya and stuff. So I think that he was doing what Ruslan Sarny was doing, which was they would go and bribe. And I remember so distinctly because I remember the quote, venal imams. I had to look up venal, like imams who would take money to kind of, I think it was about radicalizing them. That's what I think Uncle Ruslan and Tamerlan were about. I think Johar was not about anything. And then when I believe he must have gotten made because the Russians sent a note to the CIA saying, get that guy out of here. So then we said that he was a terrorist, like, oh, Russia pointed out that we have a terrorist in our midst. It was like, no. They just made him. So now he's no good for you. You can't use him. He probably knows a lot. Maybe you need a patsy. And I think that's why they took they dovetailed a lot of different things with that event. But I think they were taking out a CIA agent or two that they couldn't use anymore. I know that's bad. And I think the Chris Kyle thing folds into it as well. Like Chris Kyle, Kraft, there was Kraft international logos all over the Boston Marathon. There were a couple were seen, guys with black backpacks, and Kraft International was the mercenary group, if I understand it correctly, that Chris Kyle, the American sniper from the movie, that was his company. And they were there, or people with their logos, their outfits were there. And about 2 months before that, Chris Kyle was killed in a very weird way. And it's always been my suspicion that they came to him and they said, this is what we're going to do. And he was like, hey, dude, I kill people, but I have my own ethics about it and I'm not doing this. But they had already told him. So and then, maybe they wanted to use his organization. I don't know, but I always smelled a rat with that timing as well. And that was like the practice for martial law. See what people would do, can you get people to lock down for indefinitely? And then there were two FBI agents on the hostage negotiation team or hostage rescue team, which is a very small elite group that they don't have like 5 different things going on every day. They have like 80 guys. They do a limited number of things a year. 2 of the guys on the hostage rescue team who I saw reported were there during the Johar Tsarnaev capture. I can't really verify that, but they both fell out of a helicopter like a month later to death. So there's a lot of little threads to pull on there, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist, but that's when I started to believe in 9/11. I was like, oh, I used to not believe in 9/11 because I didn't think they would do it. And then I saw, I don't know, it was Mueller or whatever, some FBI guy saying, oh, we're looking for these 2 guys. We don't know them. And I don't know if anybody can identify them. Like, you can't identify 2 guys whose actual address in your documents is 1 mile from this, who are known terrorists to you. You can't figure out those are the guys that you have a picture of. But if you'll recall, like for 2 days, they were telling people, be on the lookout. Don't go out. Don't go out of your house. Lock down Boston. So anyway, I think there you go.
So you're working radio at the time, and the reason you dive deep into this research is, like you said, so you can defend yourself when people come at you. Yeah. So what's going through your head as you're uncovering all this, and what was the next move once you kind of figure all this was an inside job?
Well, I'll tell you, I was so nervous all the time about being on the radio and making it good. I'm not a performer. I was a banker, like that was not my thing. Somebody asked me to do it. This gal who worked there, she was a producer, and I got to know her, and she was like, you got to go on the radio. You know so much stuff and blah, blah, blah. It was mostly about being a libertarian. That's all I really knew about. I had just recently converted to anarcho-capitalism, and she was fascinated by it. But I was always terrified about being on the air. So if I just somehow felt I needed always to have like a, original wow thing, like on the show. I just wanted it to be interesting. I never wanted to just drone on like I just did to you, but there was a lot of interesting stuff in there. But I never really wanted to just like, if you read the Wall Street Journal, you could read people. I feel like they do. That's what all they're doing on the radio. Like, how is that good? How did I not go right to the top? I can read out loud, so I just didn't get it. But so I was just excited to share what I had found out with the world. Like, I was like, wow, people are just going to be, this is going to be some good radio, because, sometimes you can get very absorbed in your own, what makes you nervous, right? So if it makes you nervous, anything that's going to make you not nervous. Like, I wasn't worried about the world. Like, now I worry about the world. Like, now that I've seen it all, so that my friend who was my producer, she got it right away. She's like, you can't say that. I was like, but it's true. She's like, people will run and scream. You cannot say that. They will think you're crazy. I'm like, but I'm not crazy. I got the pictures. I can tell them about it. I can put it on my website. Like, they can do it. Everyone can follow along. And she was like, no. And I said, well, then I can't go on the air because I've got nothing to say. I said, well, talk about the pressure cooker. The pressure cooker isn't, are they going to outlaw pressure cookers, And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I think I got some meat here. I think I want to go with this. And she did not want to hear it because she loved me and she didn't want me to have problems. So I just said, I'm not going on the air then. I'm just not doing it. And wasn't because I was being a jerk. I had I used to get stage fright. So I didn't have anything else. So she got the program director on the phone, I think, to talk me down. And he said, well, can you back it up? And I said, yeah. And he said, God, go for it. And I was like, great. And she believed me, but she was worried for me. And he was such a great guy. The day he retired, they retired my show. He was the one. That was it. And I realized, like, he was the one. And so it took me, then I started cracking codes because this was that brief window where they gave us the internet and let us think it was ours. So they had all this stuff in it that made me think that was something for us. And I cracked the code on MH370, the airplane that fell out of the sky over Malaysia. I figured that out. I figured out what happened to Miriam Carey. Well, I didn't figure it out, but I pieced together like Miriam Carey, that chick in DC that was killed by 13 bullets from the Capitol Police while her little baby was in the car, that she was set up.
It's so crazy that happened, yet we couldn't get one police officer at the Capitol building on January 6th, huh?
That's when I knew the Capitol Police, because I looked into that. And I think, the Capitol Police are like a crack team of take no prisoners. Like, they are deep inside. They're their own thing. You cannot mess with them. And I think there's like 3,000 of them. Yeah. So, and then when they murdered that woman right in front of the Congress gave them a standing ovation. So I was like, okay, now we know it's good. That's right. That's when I knew that January 6th thing. I was like, ain't nobody messing. They don't need the sergeant at arms to gun down that unarmed woman. The Capitol Police would have been all over that. And you see all that stuff. And so in the end, once I realized all that, like, I'm still trying to figure out the true nature of the power structure. And if they throw the occult stuff at us to throw us off the scent of just like unadulterated greed and power, they make us think that they're really after transhumanism just so that we won't notice that we're like all slaves. That I still don't really understand what they're up to, but I think this past year, we all understand how far they've progressed. There is a brick wall behind the curtain. Yeah. And I don't know what to do about it. I mean, acid and agorism seems like the right plan, but I don't think we're taking back the earth that way unless unless everybody does it and you have like a Gandhi style thing. If everybody does it, then it's messed up for them. But if it's just 60s style where only it's a subculture, I think that's a little trickier. But you could save yourself.
Yeah, I was listening to Oli Demigard on Tinfoil this afternoon, and that's kind of where he was talking about. He said something to the effect of like 2015 was really like the last time where you were going to be able to save people. And if you didn't take the red pill in 2015, when we got to 2020, there's no saving those people. Like the people that are wearing double masks and driving in their car with rubber gloves by themselves, like you're never going to be able to save that person. You're never going to be able to, it's easier to trick someone than it is to convince them that they've been tricked.
Yes.
And it's easy to figure out who those people are now.
Do you know why? I have an idea of why it would be 2015, but do you know why he pointed out 2015?
He had mentioned a date previous to that, where that was kind of like, okay, here's where it's starting. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. And then he said by 2015, it was like, all right, everyone that was going to be saved was you're either on this side or on that side. And by 2015, anyone that's on this side, we'll just call it the left. You're not going to be able to save those people. They're going to drive around with double masks and rubber gloves with their top down, and there's no saving them. So at that point, whether they're friends or family, you've almost got to I've got to do my own thing. I've got to worry about myself and take care of myself at this point, because no one's coming to save us.
And you can't worry what they think of you. But 2015 was the red letter mark for me, because I was on the air and I had been, what was great about, so I don't get stage fright about being on a podcast, but I used to get stage fright there and I did not like it, and it never went away. So I don't miss having a radio show, but it had two values to it that I'll never get back, which is, one is that I could put ideas out there to people who would never hear them otherwise and might be open to them, or who might be open to them because they heard it on the radio. And then the other thing, which was much, much more important to me, is people would call me and tell me what it was like on the ground in the communities that that CNN and Fox were telling you they knew all about. And because Atlanta is really diverse. So it has a big gay community, has a big Black community, has a white community, has a lot of immigrants, African immigrants, South American, and Brazilian. And you would be amazed. First of all, every Uber I ever went into, I immediately dove into that wasn't Ubers back then, but any conversation I had, and taxi, anything like that, immediately anybody not from the United States, I was like 9/11. Everyone's like, yeah. So I immediately knew that absolutely everybody who wasn't kind of cookie cutter American public school and white, like, because even the African American community there, who've been in this country for 150 years, their family, they knew it was bull. Like, they didn't believe anything. Or the people who called me anyway, there were plenty of people, even if they had ideological differences. That was the thing. Like, they could think socialism was morally correct, which people do think that. And I think that liberty, and, I can't even call it capitalism anymore because capital's been corrupted, but like, you could separate the ideology from, that's why I say, like, I don't care about ideology anymore. The corruption and the deception at the top, they're just using ideology to distract us from the fact that ideology doesn't matter at all anymore. So I had this opportunity to actually get the feedback from people to tell me how it really was. So I was totally plugged in. And then I saw it in like 2015, where for all those years that I was that Obama was the president, I had pretty easy show, because I could explain to people how these policies violated the Constitution, violated liberty, violated common sense, had implications for the future, and was just fundamentally immoral. People can understand that. My philosophy is don't steal and don't kill. That's all you need. It's the same thing as God is irrelevant, or the question of is there a God is irrelevant and unanswerable. It doesn't matter, because don't steal and don't kill. Like, that's our rule. It works for both realms of existence. And it was totally fine for the Republicans who called me when I was talking about it for Obama. But when I started saying that against Trump, they wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow it. They would call and argue with me, and I would blow their heads up, because I would just point out the contradictions. Like, why do you think Middle Easterners do not get any kind of rights unless you think that it is the Constitution that gives you your rights? You know what I mean? Like, so if Obama wasn't empowered to change a fundamental law, why is Trump, like, why is that okay? And they really couldn't answer it. And this, I should have seen it coming, because I would defend Ron Paul, and they would tell me that I was crazy, and it was his policies, his foreign policy, were dangerous. And I would say, look, do you think that human beings are capable of self-government or not? Because that's what the Enlightenment was about. That's what the American experiment was about. If we're not, if human beings are actually animals and they can't be trusted he's just crazy, he's going to blow off nukes. It's like, what? Okay, well then we're completely doomed. So don't even give up our rights to do that. And I just, once Trump came along, and I'm not a hater of Trump at all. I don't hate cute people, none of that. I don't hate it, but I see it for what it is, which was, it was redirecting the fundamentally good, moral, and foundational for this country spirit that animated the Ron Paul movement. They knew they had a problem, and they just restructured it and put it under Trump and his loud mouth, all form without content. But I knew Trump was a psyop within 1 month of his announcing, when he made that speech about, I'm sure immigrants, there's some who are good people. Remember that launched his campaign in 2015? About a month later, that chick was killed. Supposedly, Kate Steinle was killed in San Francisco by an illegal immigrant, supposedly. That story is full of holes. And as soon as that story came down in direct support of what Trump had just said, I mean, that is the mark of a false flag from a mile away. And it is never a waste of time to dig into that stuff, because you're always going to find the smoking gun. And in that case, it was such a massive smoking gun that illegal immigrant, they couldn't even get a conviction. And the public defender who got him off died under very mysterious circumstances shortly after he made a documentary about it, a documentary that you cannot find, called Ricochet.
Is it a 2 holes in the back of the head suicide?
Yes, the Gary Webb style, same region too. And so I see that stuff, and I know it right away, and I was completely right about Trump. That was June 2015. Only because I dig into the news like that, as if I'm going to have to answer questions about the facts, like as if I were a journalist, which I'm not. I don't do any investigating, just open source investigation. But
well, according to Brian Regal, you have no credit then.
I have a lot of letters next to my name, but they're not his. They're not his letters. So, and actually, I have a lot of letters next to my name, and I have found that other people who I know who also do are less open to the truth, that they're more desperate to secure their worldview because they're so invested in it.
One of the most depressing things of this past year was some of the smartest people I know have become the dumbest people I know. And everyone I knew who was a boomer and did LSD have become the opposite of that this year and support the mainstream narrative. And it's been some of the most disheartening stuff for me, just to be like, where is this disconnect with the people who have all this education that only believe it on the news because to them that's a credible source, or these people who were against the Vietnam War, knew it was a sham back then, but what's going on right now is real. That's the head scratcher for me.
I was very disappointed in the old people. Like when I would start going to the grocery store and I'd see old people and I'd be like, this is ridiculous, right? And they're like, yes, some people are wearing their masks. I was like, what? But those, I think, were the same people who were the kind of draft protesters, whatever. And then all of a sudden there was this phenomenon called the Reagan Democrat. And I think there was the same thing. The boomers who were just like, oh, forget it. Now that I've sown my oats, I want to like put on a tie and make some money. And I'm a buster. So I'm like a baby buster. So every time I like had a little money put in the market, just like crashed. Every time I bought like 3 houses, and every time there's like a housing crash, all the down payment gone. So I'm a total buster. And I think that that's those boomers, they're old people who were those kids. Whereas my mother is really old. And my father fought in World War II. So, and they're religious. So they don't care, or my father's dead. But my mother is like, why does the Pope care about COVID? I mean, wait, isn't this when you want to go to church if we're all going to die? I don't get it. And then I saw it just recently and she said, that guy, I'm telling you, I've been a Catholic longer than him. He's got to get with the program. The Pope. But, she's cool. But, you're right. Those guys, they seemed so enlightened, but maybe they just didn't. And I don't blame them for not wanting to fight in a war in Vietnam, any of that. But it might have just been like, fuck no, I ain't doing that, and I can act like I'm a conscientious objector, but I'm really just a guy who doesn't want to do that.
No. Yeah, we recently just had Douglas Valentine on the podcast, and usually my mom won't listen to me or Rich, but I can send her a Graham Hancock book. I can send her some literature, and she'll read it. She'll read anything. So I sent her all his books, and she called me. She's like, you know what? She's like, I knew that war was a sham when it happened. I knew it was an inside job, and I just was like, well, what about now, Mom?
Yeah,
right. Oh, it's different now.
She thinks it's different now.
Yeah, oh she's not on this. She doesn't subscribe to the same stuff me and Rich do.
I mean, they just pushed it all into ground. I just read a book by Jim Keith called Mass Control, and it was about MK Ultra and how like just the hammer fell and there was absolutely no more record keeping about it. So then you just have to go with like the accounts that are told by people who have experienced it. But it was still amazingly compelling in that there's so much evidence of what went on before. And there is not a chance in the world it's less bad now. There's just look at what's happening. It's gotten to the point, I think, where they've gotten so masterful at psychology, which is what all that was, that they don't even need war anymore, like to kill people and get you in line. It makes me feel a little powerless, but even my mother, like, it's your own, you got control, you got free will, you got reason, you know right and wrong. They can't control your mind. What? That's a cop out. And she's right. We have to control our minds unless they're literally putting stuff in the water like fluoride, which I believe is the same thing as what's in fluoxetine, which is Prozac.
Yeah.
So
it was the Nazis were the first to do that, I believe.
Oh, really? And didn't they drug the troops to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the cutting edge of all that. And they took the Nazis over here to like continue their work.
Massive.
I mean, one of the guys in the thing was a Nazi. Like our guy, he was a Nazi.
Well, this is a funny little story, but I was talking to a family member about this was kind of more towards beginning of the summer when it was talking about Trump being a Nazi and white supremacist and all this stuff. And I was like, you realize that the United States actually brought like 1,000, if not more, Nazis to work for the United States. And the response was, well, some of them were just scientists and they got caught up in it and they had no choice and they had to do what they were told to do. And they were just looking for a way to get out. And that's how their way out was to come here. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I have to get off the phone now because I can't.
And maybe that was why they were selected. Were they the only scientists in the world? Like, those fucking guys will do anything. You know? Hey, let's get those guys on our team. We thought we had some evil geniuses. Like, look, the Nazis already did the interviewing for us. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
And it's like, imagine what a Nazi and a white supremacist must go through every day, waking up knowing that his grandchildren are half Jewish.
Oh, I know. Well, that's why I think the Q thing is going to what his daughter converted. So his daughter's Jewish and the kids are 100% Jewish. So that's why I think the Q thing now, I feel like it was established under Trump, but it's going to be directed to like real full Nazi stuff now, because they're freed from that constraint. And I think that's where the pedo stuff is going to go. They're going to say Epstein, Mossad. They're going to make that morph into anti-Semitism is my fear. It's worrisome, because if they want to make those guys Nazis.
That's my other, curiosity or question, scratch my head with all of this. Was all of this stuff in the last year, because now we're seeing states are, Monday, no more mask mandates, Texas, Missouri, Mississippi. I just saw Connecticut is opening up. Was all of that done because of Trump and just to get him out of office? Or is all of this, again, like a psyop and a sleight of hand, like look over here, and now all of a sudden no one's talking about Epstein, Mossad, Prince Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell, kind of forget about, like, is that how deep this runs? Like, so many different questions. I think it's
even deeper in that I don't think it was to get Trump out, because I think Trump is, there is a level at which where there's competition, I think, like the five families of the mafia, where there is competition for the corners. Like, I think Giuliani saw how Biden and Kerry were raping Ukraine to the tune of billions. And I think Giuliani, who is probably more of a bit player, wanted in. So he went over there and wanted to get some of that action. Didn't really work out for him, I don't think, because he was completely out of his league. So there is some of that. I think it has to be some competition like that. But Trump himself, I believe, is working for, or whatever. He was put in, I think, ultimately to justify tyrannical technocracy, to change the face of globalism, so that I think I'm starting to think of this idea I've never articulated before, but I feel like they maybe got a sense that people weren't just going to take to the one world government thing. It was maybe too hard to keep the Americans, for example, down in that way. So they chose a different scenario, and we have the scenarios that they actually ran in 2010, and they chose the scenario of having more insulated countries, but still having global technocracy. So the companies are global, but we're all virtual. So they get to basically virtually enslave us all while shutting down the borders, while kind of deindustrializing, while starving us of the benefits of trade or information exchange. And I think maybe that's part of what he was there to do. But mostly it was, I think, to embarrass people who would hire or vote for or support someone who wasn't a politician, because politics are civilizing. I think that was the method there. And if they had smelled something else on the wind, maybe they would have let him have a second term. Like, I think that Ted Cruz and Trump and Hillary were all kind of in the running, and any of them would have served a scenario or other, but like Ron Paul wasn't really in the running, so I think there was something to that. And why I think they're lifting all this stuff, it was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal yesterday. It said Asian countries, while stemming the tide of COVID because of the draconian lockdown measures, kind of screwed themselves because they didn't have the same panicked impetus to develop the vaccine and get it shots into people's arms, like us dysfunctional US and UK that met all this resistance, and people weren't social distancing, they weren't locking down, they weren't masking, they were resisting. But the upside is now people are in a mad rush for the vaccine, and that's why I think they're opening all these states up to just make the frenzy for a vaccine just out of control. And that way they can, I think that's what that's about. Because if they kept the lockdown, people would just stay home and be like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't need the vaccine.
No. It's weird how there are massive amounts, especially like teachers. Because I used to be, like I said, I was a special education teacher for 11 years. And
I have a son who has Down syndrome.
Yeah. And that's, again, part of the podcast, listening to you for the song. It's like, we have this connection.
Yes.
Got this, you never meet certain people, but you're like, listen to them talking.
Yes,
you're like,
yes.
I do this and
totally.
do this. We got all these things in common. But yeah, I mean, one of my friends is a union president, and he said that there's almost, I think he said it was like over 75% of the teachers didn't want to go back to work until they had the vaccine. And I'm like, I'm going to dust off my certificates and like, I'm going to the highest bidder because I'm going in maskless and let's go. Who wants to do schoolwork?
So LA, I can see what they're doing. In LA, they just, for whatever reason, all of a sudden, so we've been in complete lockdown for a year. My kids have not gone to school in an entire year. My husband hasn't gone to work in an entire year. It was very terrible, especially for the Down syndrome kid. That really hurts your heart. And all of a sudden they said, okay, I think next month or whatever, we're opening the schools on this day. And if your locality doesn't want to do it, that's fine. But so the state funds the school rather than the localities directly for the most part. They said every day that you don't open, we're taking 1% of your funding away. So I immediately thought, well, they're going to compromise with the unions by putting the teachers on the A list to get the vaccine. Like, how psychological operation is that? Like, are you on the A list? What's the A list? I want to be on the A list. It's like, I don't want to be on the A list, but there's a virtue signal here. So somebody asked me, are you going to take the vaccine? And I said, well, definitely not. But I don't want people to like ostracize my kids. So I was like, well, I thought maybe I would look into the Novavax one because it doesn't splice your DNA, and I'm, a little wary about that. And because the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca do have the potential, from what I've researched, to the extent it's available to the public, the genetic material can be mistaken or intentionally, but by your body. It's called gene transduction, and it can happen with those viral vector vaccines, or it's really gene therapy. So I don't know. I thought the Novavax one might be more conventional, and the answer, that wasn't good enough. That was my like cowardly concession to, vaccine, but it wasn't good enough. The correct answer is, I'm going to get a vaccine as soon as I am eligible. Whatever they give me is fine. Like, that was the rendition or whatever I was supposed to. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? Like, I can't. Choice is a sin now. Choice is a sin.
I'm going with, I identify as being vaccinated.
I have the antibodies. I got sick and I went and got the antibody test and I have the antibodies. That's not good enough. Like, I can't get it. Well, there are different strains. I'm like, what? I've been trying to follow along with this viral theory of yours. And from what I understand, the reason I gave my kids 48 vaccines before I even thought about it, can you fucking believe that? Blows my mind. But is that you told me that you had to do it because they never would get it again. So now they're changing the whole, because like strep throat, you get it all the time. Why would you get a vaccine? You're going to get it and you just get antibiotics. They had to, basically, it was very convenient for them to have this microbe that isn't alive, that's like 150,000 times smaller than a bacterium, by the way, than like a cell. And you can't get it twice, but you can be vaccinated against it. And now they change everything. to suit. So I don't know what this thing is. I actually know a lot of people who are sick, and including myself. And I just do not think it did not feel like a microbial thing. I felt like I was in a chemical attack. It was very weird, I gotta say. And I don't think it was contagious because we're all freaking locked down. The only person I came into contact with was someone who had gotten the vaccine the day before. So I don't know what to make of any of those data points. Feel free to do what you want with them. I really do not know, but none of what they say is shaking out into my experience base. And I mean, yeah, identify as vaccinated. I love that. I'm going to have to go with that, but there's no way out. Like, I don't know what I think I have to move. I would like to move.
Yeah.
We're going to get you guys out of LA.
How has it been in LA throughout this whole time? Are you ready to get the hell out of there?
I haven't really experienced it very much because I've been locked in, but I would go to the grocery store. I would I would try to identify with the olds online, but I would just end up identifying with the cashiers because they live in the world and they're just like, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I have masks that say like, I'm not buying it. And people who get it, like, will talk to me. And people who, I made a new friend because she was wearing a shirt that said impeach Newsom. I was like, oh. So it's just, I worry about my kids. Like, they passed the mandatory vaccination thing here, not for COVID, but for other stuff to go to school. So why wouldn't they just include this? Then what? I'm happy to like have them help me garden and forget about school. They're teenagers already, but they want to live in the world. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a shame that we can handle certain situations and have the wherewithal and the mental capacity, but to see running around the city here in Denver during the day, and you run by an elementary school and the kids are all out on recess and they're all running around with masks on. It's like, what are you doing to these poor children? Or like you said, how could you have a Down syndrome student that is you expect them to log into a Zoom class and do online learning for, 5 days a week, or some schools are, half and half. It's like, it's just not,
it's been a big problem, and he hates it. So when they put out the word a week ago, anybody who wants to return to school can. And in his class of whatever it was, 10 or 15 kids, he was the only kid who was signed up.
Really?
Yeah. So That's the problem. They're true believers. And he went crazy by himself.
Good for him.
And he sits in the classroom with his little laptop and his aide. And he loves it. He's very happy. And I said to him, I was like, he thought he was going to go see his friends. And I said, you're not going to see your friends because they're still afraid, but you can be a leader. And he said, yeah. And I said, if you go, maybe they'll feel empowered or want to go see you. But then I went to visit my 92-year-old mother and they won't let him back in the school.
Really?
Yeah, because we went on a plane. But she's 92. Forget it. I'm not going, but still.
That's interesting that he was the only one in class, because in my experience in 11 years, the kids in the special education department were some of the ones that had the best attendance. Like, we had a couple kids that had never missed a day.
Yeah, and the parents are generally cooler, but that's what I'm saying. It's LA. Like, I thought it was the government. I was like, these policies are terrible. And then I was like, I could not get a witness. I was walking around like, right? Am I right? That's why I became friends with the person with the shirt. I was like, okay, I guess that's just me and you, kid. It's just like, okay.
Where's the other 1.9 million people around here?
It's really kooky. It's really, really kooky. And actually, the way I met her, I got to tell you, it's kind of funny, is that I saw somebody wearing the shirt and I talked about it on my show, and she tweeted at me. She said she listens to my show. What? It's like a 1 in a million chance that I would say that in my neighborhood. Somebody heard me say it in the box, it wasn't on the radio. It was great. So next time she was walking, I caught up with her. But so I guess there are people. And then I talked to Adam the Agorist from Deborah Gets Red Pilled, whom I love. And he turned me on to freedomcells.org, which other people have talked about. But I'm also starting to organize meetups on my website, just as a way for people to connect with one person in their neighborhood, one person in their city to go have a beer with, who can be like, right? I know. That's all you need, is someone you just don't have to wonder if they, and it's the pressure to, there's no point in talking about in exchanging ideas with people who puke on them, don't cast your pearls among swine. And then they immediately, it's no coincidence that they closed the bars and the churches and even the gyms, because that's where we would have talked to each other.
Yeah.
But my entire, world is that people who are afraid of someone like me with my thoughts. I'm like, look, I'm standing here with a mask. I didn't go anywhere. I don't do anything. I don't care. I'm doing everything you're telling me to do. I just think it's stupid. And they think that I'm secretly engaged in dangerous behavior.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Monica, because, Jimmy and I, although we don't buy into any of the nonsense that's going on, but we follow the rules, sometimes begrudgingly. But, when you're talking to family members and they're telling you you're crazy, they're the ones that are going on vacation. They're the ones that are meeting and going out to do things. And this was in like the beginning of it. And it's like, you're yelling at me, but you're the one that's doing all the bad stuff. And you're telling me it's all right. You're a prisoner, or at least you're a prisoner in your own home. And I'm like, well, come to my 500 square foot apartment where I'm sharing with my brother. And then, then we'll be speaking a different tune. But, we're here doing our thing.
Yeah, immediately it was very regressive. I noticed right away, because my daughter's friend is, they're just loaded. And the first thing they did was fill like their extra rooms with stuff from Costco. And I was like, imagine if you didn't have an extra room. Imagine if you didn't have enough rooms for each person to do their little Zoom call. I don't care about the laptop. The schools give you the laptops and they give you lunch and everything. But if you don't have a room, it's difficult. And if you don't have a place to stockpile the toilet paper, or the money to buy a 10-year supply of toilet paper or whatever people were doing, it's so regressive. And who gets to keep working? People who work with computers, who work virtually, people who are totally above the neck workers get to stay. But anybody who has to work with their hands, and I think that was highly intentional for two reasons. One is, the people who can do stuff are the people who can do stuff, the people who are less likely to be dependent on the state. I've noticed that before, like that they know how to fix things. They could figure out, even if they don't have a gun or use a gun, you could just look at it and figure it out. But if you never do anything in meat space, you're really not good at that. And they've been threatening us for so long about how robots are going to take our jobs. And that's why we need a UBI. And I've always said, it's outrageous that our government takes our Department of Defense money or whatever and subsidizes technologies that the free market would never find necessary in the free exchange of labor and capital and stuff. Like that stuff would just trade off. You would never have voice to text or driverless cars until there was no one left to drive a car, which will never happen in a world of 7 billion people. So the government's absolutely subsidized that, accelerated that. It's now like fascism. So it's not just the government, it's the whatever corpo governmental continuum. And then, but that wasn't even enough. Because I said, you know what, worst comes to worst, we'll just give each other some massages. That's how we'll occupy ourselves. If somebody can work, I'll just give him a massage all day and then he can give me food and I don't even care. And then they were just like, okay, everyone can do everything unless it has to do with giving a massage, being a waitress, anything that a human being has to do, they made sure human beings were not allowed to do. And that for me it was so devastatingly regressive. And how, I used to be a waitress and I moved out from my parents when I was 17 and I waitressed. I had the freedom to move out from my parents' house because I knew I could support myself. And I could do it because waitressing is good money and you just have to work hard, whatever. And when I started seeing them saying they wanted to give you $15 an hour instead of 15% tips, that's like a 60% cut in pay. So now you don't have a blue collar chick who can raise a kid anymore without going on the dole. So that everybody's on the dole, everyone's welfare. It's a terrible thing. And that's why I think it was intentionally regressive. That's why when I listen to the World Economic Forum stuff, the Great Reset, they always couch it in terms of equality and good stuff for the poor people. And I mean, you don't have to question their motives. You can just see what they did, because those are the actual same people by name who did this. That Event 201 thing was a blueprint with their names on it. And what they did is, I mean, that's when you start getting into is greed this powerful, or is it really something darker? What do you think? Is it?
I don't know. I know if I had Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates' money, I wouldn't be worried about vaccines.
This is what I always say. I could never have their money, because once I got to like $10 million, I would have stopped. So who keeps going? Like where does that even come from? What more can you, it's like Office Space. I just want to do 2 chicks. Like, I don't really need that much, Once you're there, like, how much time are you going to spend at the office when you could be doing the 2 chicks? Like, I don't, like, there must be something else driving them that's beyond what I can conceive of. And that's when I start wondering, that's when I just start like, I was going to say that's when I go to church, but I can't go to church because I live in LA.
Yeah, I mean, Monica, we want to be respectful of your time. So we have, we call them rapid fire, but they're not like quick answers per se, but it's a set standard questions we ask every episode of every guest. Okay. And so, do you drink coffee?
Yes.
How do you brew it? How do you take it?
My husband's a gear guy, so we have an espresso machine, but I really just like Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's type stuff. So I make a long coffee, black, and I have 2 of them. But since I quit drinking for Lent, 2 is too much. So I realized the alcohol caffeine cycle is, perpetual motion.
Okay.
Machine.
Okay. Yeah. How's that going for you, Lent?
It's okay. I don't know why I had that going. It's okay. I'm fine with it. And I have a sponsor who has a super high quality CBD that he's the True Hemp Science. And he sends me goodie bags all the time. And I'm loving every minute of it. So when I start getting stressed, I'm like, oh, this is when I'd be making a cocktail. I just get like 15 drops of the CBD oil, and it's not really mind altering at all, but I'll tell you, I never, for the rest of the evening, never even occurs to me to want to drink, and I sleep like a rock. I wake up great. I don't know if I think it's been great. I'm actually kind of maybe a convert at this point. We'll see on Easter Sunday what I go for.
Right on. Well, I got some, I could send you some seeds too. So if you want to do some more gardening, I can make that happen for you.
So I have my boys, my husband and my son, doing the garden in the backyard, but my son has a light in his closet. So I don't know what's going on up there, but
that's awesome.
I'm staying out of the closet.
Good for him.
I don't know what's going on up there, but I feel like if you are too open about that kind of thing, then like the floodgates open. But if everybody has to kind of like, don't let mom see, keeps it under control.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning with the LSD is, we grew up in a very strict household where things like marijuana, psychedelics were right up there with heroin and the worst of the worst. So you talk about, having that fear of, combining the substance and the marathon. But I think a lot of times some of that fear just comes from your indoctrination of what we were brought up with or what was demonized. And when you because I didn't dabble into LSD at least until into my 40s. So
Really?
I had, yeah.
You're
I
in
mean,
your
I had
40s?
done. I'm 45.
Nice.
Thank you.
I might have to do what you're doing.
We can make that happen. We'll get you a starter kit. But yeah, I think it's because I got into it so late with that particular substance, I was able to have a clear head about it and realize like, oh, a lot of this stuff, like you're going to lose your mind, you're going to go crazy. The MK Ultra type stuff is like, oh, well, yeah, that can be possible, but I'm administering it myself. So I'm going to start very small and I'm going to incrementally increase till I get to that line where I'm right on the border. And then I'm probably not going to go over that line. I'm going to stay below that line. Where sometimes, people that do it in high school or college, they don't have that in their mind.
That's the problem, is that they're kids. So but the alternative, so I'm sure you know this because you seem to have done your homework, but my oldest brother died of AZT poisoning, which I directly connect to Fauci. Then one of my sisters, who I was mentioning earlier, died. She officially tried to commit suicide, but she really was just trying to. She always said that if you can't cop when you need to cop, that's when people try to kill themselves. I don't know, but I think she even called the hospital on herself, but they committed her for 60 days and they cleaned her up and they were going to let her out. And I said, we all were like, don't let her out. You can't let her out. She's going to be dead in 24 hours. And she absolutely was, with a needle in her arm. Yeah. And they did say it had fentanyl in it, but it wouldn't have mattered. I don't think it would have mattered, but so we have excess in my family, real problems with that stuff. But I'll tell you, in my experience, without giving too many details or observations, the real gateway drug is alcohol. So if you've got somebody who's a moderate pot user for a very stressful world, that's nowhere near as dangerous, in my opinion, in the short term with driving and stuff, falling down, all that, and the long term of what your life is going to be like. I don't habitual marijuana users don't seem to be performing optimally also, in my experience, but the alcoholics really cause problems. So yeah. I feel like, and I also feel like, this is another Kaczynski thing, that this life I've set up for my family out of complete ignorance, thinking I was doing the right thing, just this treadmill situation, is so profoundly unnatural and unhealthy that, like Kaczynski said, that's why they have to augment you. They have to give you Prozac to take the stress. They have to change your biology so that you can endure. And caught unawares, condition white, here we are, and my kids are halfway through high school. I just wonder about, the anxiety is a real problem for these kids. It's not necessarily my kids, that generation is just so full of anxiety that I don't know if me being a micromanaging hovercraft, what's going on in there? What's going on? I'm not sure. If they can come in and out and seem totally normal, have dinner with me, get straight A's, I don't really feel like arbitrary, that's unnatural or illegal. Everything they're doing is totally unnatural. And I feel like if they can keep it together, I don't want to be in their face about stuff. So I don't ask, don't tell.
And I always tell my friends that everything is a teachable moment with their kids. I think you can combat a lot of things with education.
I don't know, because I feel like things have changed so much that my experiences aren't always relevant to the kids coming up,
Yeah.
And I don't always trust my instincts, but I just go with, my main thing is that I love them, and I don't really have an agenda as to how they live their lives other than to be good people who are true to their natures so that they can be healthy mentally. And that's it. So that takes a lot of the pressure off, because I am never fool myself into thinking that I've got to get them to do something for me. And that helps. I'm going with that.
Well, if you ever want to adopt a 34-year-old, holler at me.
Yeah, everybody needs some unconditional love, right? That's it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I'll let you know right now, there's no way we would have got away with having a light in our closet growing up. I'll tell you that.
Well, I'm thinking that what's going on up there is, well, I guess it couldn't possibly be tomatoes. I gave him some basil seeds. What is it?
Wheatgrass.
Wheatgrass. I'm sure that's what it is. I'm sure that's what it is. And it might be. It could be. I don't know, but I don't look and I don't want to know. But I also, like, as far as the no agenda thing, is that I don't feel like I'm so, like, after this year, I'm against contributing to the world as it is. So there is no agenda for me. Like, the only thing I would really like them to be able to do is to be autonomous organisms in this organic world and be spiritually prepared if there's a spiritual world. That's it. So what college they go to, if they don't want to go to college, I'd be perfectly happy with that. But these kids, they want to go to college. They want to, they want to do all these things that I mean, I no longer value. So.
You know what Ted Nugent said about college?
What?
I didn't go. I was too busy learning stuff.
That's so true. I went to college till I was like 30. So I went to school, and it was only after, when I had time to, and even when I was an investment banker for a while, even after that, I just I didn't have time or like mental bandwidth to read anything but like fiction or have a drink and watch TV. And it was only after that, when I started to raise kids, that I started to read stuff of substance and really figure stuff out. And what a load of crap we are taught, as going in, like, it's just a pile of lies. That's why this, we got another sponsor, Etienne Laboetie Squared, who has been on a lot of podcasts lately, but he wrote a book, which is like for visual learners, that is basically meant to wake people up. And it's called Government is a Scam. And it shows you, like, from school to scouts to the military to all these different ways that you're just completely painted this illusory picture from like the minute you're born. And it's very impossible to get out of that mental cage. You really have to have the freedom. And that's why I really am grateful to my husband for working, and he lets me be who I am. Like, he doesn't care. He doesn't care when I meet his work people. I'm like, you don't tell them about the podcast. Like, nobody needs to know that I have a podcast. We don't want them to hear it. But he's like, no, you're so smart and you can justify everything. And, you're just really after the truth. And I'm like, yeah, there's going to be somebody out there who's not okay with it, but he loves me for who I am. The unconditional love thing, it goes a long way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Monica, do you have a morning routine or daily practice?
It's really, now that you asked me that question, I need to absolutely swap it out. When you call it a daily practice, I wake up, my lovely husband brings me a cup of coffee in bed, just the way I like it. That gets me out of bed. I make my second cup. I feed my fish. I watch my fish. And, maybe that's my practice. And then I make the list. And that's when, I plug back in to the clock, and it stinks, but I really like the fish. The fish are good. I think I feel guilty when I sit and watch the fish in the morning with my second cup of coffee. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's the making the lists I should feel guilty about. My mother says to say, oh my gosh, she's so funny. Just say an ejaculation. So apparently Mary, Jesus, and Joseph in Catholic is any like prayer that's just a word is literally called an ejaculation. I'm sorry.
Learn something new every day.
It's so crazy. It's true. She's like, Mary, Jesus, and Joseph. And then, that'll get you through the moment. It's the craziest thing. Sorry, I shouldn't have said this. Is one thing I'm embarrassed of this entire interview.
So is the list your daily, like what you got to do?
My to-do list with like every minute accounted for. Well, it's mostly this like lockdown thing is that everybody's here and I don't like to waste food. So I don't just like, you're going to eat it. People don't eat what they don't want to eat. So I kind of make everybody a different, I always like to make a hot breakfast for each of the kids so that, I tell them like, when you look back at your childhood, I want you to remember these hot breakfasts and say, my mother loved me. And so like, I show them the breakfast like, we loved you.
Good on you.
And every time they have a hot breakfast for the rest of their lives, they're going to remember that I love them. So I try to do that, but it takes a lot of time and you got to clean up. And then, then I have to do my show, which is every single day. And it's like, the better we make it, the longer it takes. Cause then we prep for a couple of hours and then we're on. So it's basically an hour of recording, but we spend an hour before just talking to each other about my partner, Brad Binkely, and I talking about what you got, what you think, what's the point of that story? Like, let's get to it faster. What's the order we're going to talk? But we used to just wing it, but we want to make it better. And it's just now expanded to like at 4 hours a day. So then I got to wrap it up by the time I got to start driving these kids to the school. And then, I started gaining weight because who can make dinner and all that. So really my main job, my husband works like a dog. So I have no help anymore. I had a babysitter, but she quit because of COVID, but my husband's job took a hit anyway. So we weren't really going to keep that, but I'm just a mom, I'm just a mom trying to mom. And then, but I have a lot of energy and thoughts. And, for me, I feel like it's a calling. So I asked my mother, it's like, is this a waste of time? Am I neglecting my family? And she said, God will tell you if he wants you to do something different. Just, you know what you're supposed to do. Just do it. So I don't know what's going to happen when my mother dies because she's the voice of God apparently. And I'm probably going to have to develop my own relationship with God, which I'm not great at, but I feel like I can't not do this. I don't know why, but I feel like I can't not do it, even though I do worry about the balance of it. And the lists are long.
Shout out to the propaganda report.
Thank you.
Yeah. Monica, I know you're busy. What are you listening to? Music, podcasts? Are you reading any books right now? Do you get down with audio books? Let us have it.
There you go. Okay. I had to stop listening to music the second time I left my third baby in the crib and went to the grocery store. I was like, I can't. So I mean, nothing happened. I turned around, I came right home, but I just have to worry and listen all the time. Plus I have this son who has Down syndrome and he elopes. So he runs away and I can hear a door opening. I mean, I have to sleep with my door open. He gets up with the birds, which is earlier than the sun. I don't know if anybody notices that, but the birds get up first and they wake him up. So I'm all over. I can't really just let myself go and listen to music, but my husband's business is partly live music. So even though I never liked concerts because they're too loud, you can't sit down, where are the cocktails? He's in the business. So he'll get you like backstage passes and you just sit there and drink your drink and, it's fun. And that's how I got my music, except for this year. And then, but I will, while I'm driving around, try to catch up or walking the dogs, try to catch up on podcasts. And it's funny because I absolutely cannot listen to podcasts that might give me an opinion on something that I need to have an opinion on. My mind is easily corrupted. So even in radio, I could never listen to the radio. I had to stop listening to the radio. I would listen for technique and then that was it. So now the best podcast, like No Agenda, would probably be the closest thing to what I do. I've never listened to it. I will not listen to it because I just don't want to be influenced by it. So it's hard. And if there's a real good, I'll listen to the Higher Side Chats because all of that is basically subject matter expertise. It's masterful, so I pay for it. And I find the stuff that I don't believe in yet, I guess, UFOs and esoterica or whatever, and a hollow earth or whatever. Those ones, those are like my music. Like I can put those on and it's so relaxing for me. It's like a fairy tale, but I'm not to dismiss the veracity of it. I just don't know anything about it and I'm not there at all yet. But I used to not be there on chemtrails, but I mean, they're pretty obvious. You have to really actively deny that. So I can't. So I really like that. And people often send me particular ones they know I will like, and I listen to those particular podcasts. But yeah, but I used to tweet at night a lot. I got a lot out of tweeting because people would do the same thing. I only looked at stuff that was directed at me, but it would take me minimum an hour and often 2 hours to go through just that stuff. Because I tweet out my stories before my show. As I'm doing my show prepping, I tweet the stories out, and that's like my list of what I'm going to talk about. And I get responses to that. So then I've got like 20 things on each of those. But I've had to really cut back on the tweeting because I just never had time to read books. And I have to stay informed, I feel like, a little bit deeper than just the news. So the last book I read, I'm reading a couple of books now, Thaddeus Russell's Renegade History, because I want to talk to him and I want to get to the bottom of all of that. I'm reading The Money Changers, which is about the Vatican bank scandal in the 70s and 80s, because I think they say that the bottom of the rabbit hole might be in the Vatican basement. I don't know. It's that or a mountaintop in Switzerland. So one or the other. But the book I just finished, which I've been raving about, is Jim Keith, who died under mysterious circumstances, like basically, yeah, what wasn't exactly suicide to the back of the head, but it was close enough. And it's called Mass Control. And I forget the rest of the title. It's like social engineering, or it's engineering the people or something like that. Mass Control, MASSCONTROL, Jim Keith. And it's fantastic. It's short. It's like 250 pages. I'm going to buy every single book that he refers to in the footnotes. And you know that's a good book because it's well sourced. And the first half is basically documented mind control stuff from the government. And then the middle is the like firsthand accounts of people who were in the mind control experiments. But he can't really vouch for it. He can just say, these are the ones I believe, and this is what they say, and these are their commonalities. Oh, and the end of it was about remote viewing. Remote viewing is like a UFO thing people talk about. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Like you can be someplace else outside your body. He was talking about government experiments where they are tapping into ESP. And he also talks about and so what he's doing is giving quotes from people who are doing it. So it's not like he has a book about it, but it's also not an account. It's like, this famous doctor gave this speech on this date, and this is what he said they were doing. And this is what he said electromagnetism can do to the human body, the heart, the mind, the blood. And I think that's what this COVID thing has something to do with, something non-physical that you're coming into contact with. But that they were doing verified experiments where people, and they were using it to try to get people to snoop on foreign countries. And they were coming back with irrefutable reports of people who had never been in a certain place reading the stuff on a desk. Now, the entire book, this Jim Keith book, is very well documented and sourced, and separates. The most important thing for me is to separate your opinion, your speculation, and the facts. Give me your source for the facts, the reason you think this stuff, and he does that perfectly. So if you read it, I don't think you'll be misled. on the mind control stuff because you can just evaluate it for yourself, but it was well worth it. And like, since I bought it at 52, or no, I bought it at 35, it's at 60 already. So I found that if I even gin up the slightest bit of interest in that book, because I've talked about it on the air, the prices just go through the roof sometimes. It's weird. There's some algorithm that any kind of activity seems to, not because it's like a secret book, but because these like obscure books, and I think there are a few copies. I do think that is not an accident. There's not a lot of copies. But anyway, so if you want, I can send you my copy and then you can read it.
What was the title again?
It's called Mass Control by Jim Keith. But I'm going to be the librarian of the tunnels. So I'm buying these books so that we have them. But if you want to borrow it and send it back to me, I'll do that. If it's just getting too expensive.
Yeah, I'll take a look first. I had a very good mentor a long time ago. I'm dating myself here, but he said 2 things you never loan anyone Airey is books and CDs.
Wow. Yes. Okay. Well, I would do it if I'd send you a self-addressed return envelope, but it's just rather expensive. And I talk it up a lot, but it's not a very long book. You might not think it's worth it, but most of the stuff I read, or a lot of stuff people want me to read, there's a flag in there somewhere. Like, I know that's not right. Or this seems far-fetched to me, but there was none of that in there. And then I recently read Virus Mania, the Inventing the AIDS virus. There's a lot of stuff about germ theory that's not sound.
Good.
Yeah, it's just not, it's a theory for a reason. And the older a theory is, like the theory of evolution, germ theory, the older theory is, the less likely it is to be true. Because if it were, why haven't we been able to prove it? Germ theory is a very easy thing to prove. Koch's postulates, which is like, if you sneeze in someone's face and they catch it, that you've just proved germ theory. But they cannot do that. You cannot pass a virus that way. That they've done experiments. That's what these books say. So highly recommend Virus Mania.
Okay.
And last,
you mentioned one sec, Jim. You mentioned, it's either in the basement of the Vatican or on the mountaintop of Switzerland. It's interesting that the people that guard the Vatican are Swiss guards.
Yes. Those outfits. I think I saw Klaus Schwab wearing one of those kind of things too. And I was like, where have I seen that? That doesn't look, is there a king of Switzerland? Like, why is he dressed like that? That's so weird. Wow. Well, there is something up in Switzerland. I was in Switzerland and some of the mountains are hollow. And we were driving by and the guy said, oh yeah, my friend was in that thing. See that door in the mountain? I was like, yeah, it's like, if they let you in, if the shit comes down, you're going to want the password on that door. And then, so there's definitely some up in Switzerland, but I think that's where that's where they go. That's the meeting. Of course, that is where they go. They go to Davos and they pay $1 million to go there. $1 million. Imagine what it's worth if they're paying $1 million.
Right. Imagine what they could do with that $1 million if they put it to good use.
Oh, I always think that they were all about the racism thing. I'm like, why doesn't everyone just step down and pick their successor of color and just give them all the money? I'm going to swap with you. You know what I mean? But instead they're just like, oh, well, you guys have to swap with each other, whether you want to or not. They just never, they're up to something that is not consistent with all their bullshit.
Yeah.
For sure.
And last but not least, we usually have to pre-emphasize this one, but I know we're in good company with this one. What is your favorite conspiracy theory?
Well, the one that I'm most known for being possibly the only holder of, and this is up there with evolution theory and germ theory, I'm going to call it dinosaur theory. Again, my mother comes in handy, who's not a conspiracy theorist at all. But I think it's because she's so religious that she doesn't think the earth is is as old as we're told it is. I have no idea how old the Earth is, but she's always said, yeah, I don't believe in the dinosaurs. I don't. And I was, but why, Mom? They're just too big. They're just too big. And you know what? She's right. They're just too big. They don't make sense. Like, what were they eating? You've seen pictures of them taller than the trees that take 80 years to grow. Like, what feeds that? And what holds it together? And like the feet are too small, whatever. But I don't even know. But so what I said to her, because I used to argue with her, I said to her, but Ma, we see the bones. She says, it's not the bones. If you read the little plaque, it says that it's just the clay. They say the bones are in the back, but you don't see the bones. And I was like, that's a good point, Ma. You don't see the bones. And I don't know what turned me off on the dinosaur thing. I think it was kind of like the moon landing in 9/11. I was just like, when you think about it, the story is just preposterous. And I think what got me over the hump with that one was that no primitive culture ever had a dinosaur myth or history. No bones of dinosaurs were ever found until there was an expedition around the Darwin time where they said, well, there should be like, if there's evolution, there'll be like entire, waves of animals that, come in and out of existence. So we should be able to find like shit we never even thought of before. And lo, they sent out the dinosaur expedition and it came back with dinosaur bones. I mean, too crazy for you?
No. I was going to ask, are you married to the ball?
Am I married to the bull?
To the ball.
I don't
Flat Earth.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. I did talk to Weiss about the flat earth thing with a very open mind. And I'm married to the ball. Yes, I am married to the ball. Like with a very open mind, I absolutely, hate to say it, I'm more convinced than ever that the earth is a sphere. But I don't think that the moon landing was, that what they showed us was not a moon landing, I think.
No. How about the new Mars photos?
Oh, I didn't look at it, but there is sometimes when you look at the Mars photos, you could overlay them with the place where they practiced the Mars landing, which is the largest uninhabited island in the world. So I think that's funny. I've seen those pictures. But with the moon landing thing, again, it's like the dinosaur thing. It's like, and maybe I'm wrong, because occasionally I found something preposterous that ended up being true. So I could be wrong. But I find that in this world of deception, if you have something that looks on its face to be ridiculous, go with that until it's their job to prove it to me. But the idea that they jumped off that spaceship and ran around on the moon and played golf and then got back on the spaceship, it's hard to get those things off the ground. I realize that they don't have the atmosphere and stuff, but it seemed a little tricky. And I feel like if you're going to go to the moon, you might as well take a picture of the stars while you're there, because that would be the number one most valuable thing you could possibly learn about the universe, is how perspective changes their position. It could change completely how you think about it. We have had one view the entire time from this point. Could you imagine having a little of a different dimension on the stars? I mean, it would be like Greek in magnitude. And they were like, well, oh, my bad. It's like fucking ridiculous. So.
Well, and then not to mention all of the information about it is we don't know where it went. We don't know where the technology went.
They lost the film.
Stolen.
They lost the film. And I was talking to a photographer and I said, well, how did they live stream that with like basically sound communication that traveled faster than the speed of light? Like how did they do
Nixon
that?
was on a landline.
Yeah. So the story is this. Do you know what the official story is to that? The answer?
No.
The answer is that what you saw actually took hours. So they told you it was live, but it wasn't really live. And then they spliced it together and broadcast it live. And I'm like, okay, so there's a massive deception at work that was kept secret for 50 years. but it's your deception, not my deception, and your deception, which is incredibly stupid, and mine, which actually makes them look virtuous, that they were actually trying to beat the Soviets, and they knew that if they failed, the only weakness in the moon landing is fake story is that it makes the people who faked it look noble. Like it looks like a noble lie. And they're not noble. So I really don't know what's going on. But also there's a thing called American Moon by the guy who did that great 9/11 documentary, an Italian guy. I forget his name, but you'll know it's like a 5-hour 9/11 thing. But American Moon's like an hour and a half. And it has all these photographers who say you could not possibly. So if you look up American Moon and the guy who did that, and then you can also find the 9/11 one. But all these photographers point out on the pictures how it absolutely has to be studio lighting, that there's no way the shadows and everything could be a result of light from that far away, like sunlight or whatever. And I think there's something pretty compelling about the temperature issue. The moon buggy had no radiator. And
you mean the army Jeep?
It looked like tinfoil to me. And then I actually know somebody whose mother was a friend of Werner von Braun, I think. Knew Werner von Braun. And they invited her and my friend, who was a little kid at the time, to the moon landing. And he said they just watched it like on TV, like everybody, like it was just literally on TV that they were watching it. So he didn't get any like firsthand insight into. So I don't know what they were up to, but I find that one kind of, the moon landing one,
suspect.
It's just silly to me. It just seems silly to me. I could be totally wrong, but I just want to see them get back into that spaceship. That was like, I just want to see that, because they should be starting from there. And actually what von Braun said, so he probably knew it wasn't real. He said, rocket fuel cannot do it because it's too heavy to get there and back and get off the Earth. Like the math does not work. You need to invent a new fuel. And I saw an insane squiggly line in the air out here one time. It was not that long, last year, and it was crazy looking. And I went home. Nobody said what anything. I looked it up, and it was like Elon Musk's SpaceX thing. And I was like, oh, so they did have to invent a new fuel. They did. And now they know they can go. I think. I could be wrong. It's very hard to learn everything there is to know about 5G and viruses and vaccines and the moon landing and dinosaurs. And I used to worry about that on the radio because I was like, oh, well, I'm not an expert. And I'm like, you know what? If we're told we have a representative government, then every single thing they spend my tax dollars on is something that I need to be capable of understanding. Or you don't have a representative government, and we need to have that conversation.
Definitely.
So.
Monica,
did you record a podcast with David?
Yes, it was most enjoyable. It was really fun and interesting.
Is it on your feed?
It is. I believe it's on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably in my podcasting thing too, but I know it's probably my highest rated video since I had to take everything down. I started getting strikes. I just took everything down, but I got my first strike with the Parkland thing, the Parkland shooting in 2018, when I did a show on WSB and posted it on YouTube, and I got a strike for that. For something that was on the airwaves. I thought that was pretty amazing. But it's youtube.com/Monica Perez. It's in that for sure.
Okay.
It was very fun. I really enjoyed it. That's why I wish that he could have convinced me, but I couldn't.
Yeah, we've been prepping for him. We have him coming up, so we just want to.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a swap cast. So there was other voices besides mine.
Okay.
And it's a great place to start, I think.
Cool.
Because it was not convincing. So you can listen to one where he does convince people and see, what we missed.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I know that, been lied to a lot in my lifetime. So I have tried to have a mind. I try to live with a mind that is attached to nothing and open to everything. So we'll go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, me too. I was like, yeah, if there's one big grand conspiracy that's at the root of everything, and I could really change my vision of like what the like space-time continuum really is, then maybe I have an insight into the fifth dimension, because I'd like to know the origin of the universe and if there's a prime mover unmoved, and what I can do to be satisfied that I'm doing what I need to do in this life and hopeful that there's another life. So I want the cosmic stuff to come down, but that one didn't do it.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Monica. We had a pleasure talking to you. It was awesome. Thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with the Airey Bros.
It's been a genuine pleasure too. Thank you so much for having me. The time flew by, but I bet I absolutely blew up your normal schedule, but that was just too fun.
No, we love it. And where can good people find you? I know I listen every day. I look forward around 3:30, 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. I'm always like chomping at the bit for my 35 minutes to pop up. So if you want to shout all that stuff out, we'll put everything in the show notes as well too, but we'll put this in there as well.
Thank you
let
so
us have
much.
it. Yeah.
So my show, which I do with my co-host Brad Binkely, is called The Propaganda Report. We do interviews every other week. We have lots of stuff on there, but our flagship is the Drivetime News Blast. So when I was in radio, I was not getting a daily show, but they had trained me well. So I knew there was a need for news that did not have spin, mainstream media stuff, but pull the propaganda out. So we bring the news of the day from a perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. And we've begun to realize like people are using it to kind of help them counter what their kids are learning in school or keep up with people, because the news is so annoying, but we live in the world, you got to have it. So we are doing that. And if you want more than 30 minutes, you get 45 minutes. If you're a patron, it's patreon.com/propaganda report. And we have fun things on there like live cocktail parties and Zoom parties where the patrons come on. We have a lot of fun there. And then we also do super deep dives where Binkely brings clips from the info operations, which used to be called psychological operations, from the military, the CFR, Brookings, World Economic Forum, like videos that have like 100 views. And he just trolls through them, like goes through them and finds like this gold where they're literally plotting to control our minds and control the world. And he picks those clips with an eye to trigger me, which he does. But there are super deep dives. They're on Rockfin. So rockfin.com/propaganda report. And that's all we got. And you can also go to our website, thepropreport.com. And I'm very responsive. So you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. And I try to answer every single tweet. And I've got a great feed also, with all my stories that I'm going to cover in the show. So there's a lot of content, which is why I don't have time to make dinner. But it's okay. It's worth it.
Monica, you're the best. You rock. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, you and Brad, and all your time. And I appreciate your time tonight and coming on with us and talk. And yeah, if you ever want to go down the rabbit hole of psychedelics or you need some advice, have some questions, we're your guys and we'd be happy to be your shaman. So just give us a holler and let us know.
That's a really good offer. I haven't heard that one before. So well, we can talk about that off air sometime.
Awesome. Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica. Have a great night and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, guys.
Take care.
Bye.